Long before vampires became bedtime stories, they ruled the darkness, not with armies, not with castles, but with fear. Ancient sailors refused to sail after sunset. Entire villages built homes without windows. Church bells rang through the night, not for prayer, but to warn people that darkness had arrived. The oldest records never called them vampires. They called them the first hunger. Legends claimed they were older than kingdoms, older than empires, older than written history itself. No one knew where they came from, only that every civilization had a different name for the same nightmare. In the frozen north, hunters spoke of pale shadows with glowing eyes. Across eastern kingdoms, travelers whispered about noblemen who never aged. Far beyond the deserts, caravans disappeared beneath moonlit skies, leaving behind wagons full of gold. But not a single body. It was as though something didn't want treasure. It wanted people. Then, the disappearances became impossible to ignore. Entire castles stood empty. Doors remained locked from the inside. Dinner tables were untouched. Candles still burned. Yet everyone had vanished. No footprints, no blood, no screams, only silence. Kings blamed invading armies. Priests blamed evil spirits. Scientists, centuries later, would blame disease. But hidden beneath the ruins of forgotten monasteries, another explanation survived. A single sentence carved into black stone. When the moon drinks the sun, they feed. For hundreds of years, no one understood what it meant, until one man decided to prove the legends wrong. His name was Jonathan Ashcroft, a historian, a skeptic, a man who believed every monster had a human explanation. He spent 20 years searching abandoned castles, forgotten libraries, and underground tombs. Every clue pointed toward the same place, a mountain that appeared on no map. Locals refused to speak its name. Children were warned never to look toward it after sunset. Even wolves avoided its forests. Jonathan laughed. Superstition. He hired 12 guards, packed enough supplies for a month, and climbed the mountain. They reached the summit just before nightfall. There, hidden beneath centuries of vines, stood an enormous stone gate. It was unlike anything Jonathan had ever seen. No royal crest, no family symbol, only thousands of claw marks covering every inch of the stone, as though something inside had spent centuries trying to escape. One guard whispered, "We should leave." Jonathan ignored him. He brushed away the dirt covering the center of the gate. An inscription slowly appeared. The words were written in a language older than Latin, yet somehow he understood everyone. "Do not wake the first king." Jonathan smiled. "There are no vampire kings." He pressed both hands against the ancient stone. Nothing happened. Then the mountain trembled. Birds exploded into the sky. The wind vanished. Every torch around the entrance extinguished at once. A deep sound echoed beneath the earth. Not an earthquake, not thunder. It sounded like a heartbeat. Slow, heavy, ancient. Boom, boom, boom. The stone gate slowly opened. Cold air poured from the darkness below. It smelled not of death, but of rain. Fresh rain. As though someone had been breathing inside that chamber for thousands of years. Jonathan lifted his lantern. The light reached only a few feet before disappearing into blackness. Then he saw them. Footprints, perfectly human, leading out of the tomb, not into it. One of the guards counted quietly. "There are 12. Jonathan looked back. His expedition had begun with 12 guards. He counted again. Only 11 stood behind him. No one had heard a scream. No one had seen anyone leave. One man had simply ceased to exist. Then, from somewhere deep inside the mountain, a calm voice echoed through the darkness. So, the world finally remembered us. Jonathan's lantern went out, and 2 crimson eyes opened in the black. The crimson eyes never blinked. Jonathan Ashcroft stood frozen. The 11 remaining guards slowly backed away. No one spoke. No one breathed. The darkness beyond the ancient gate seemed alive. Then, footsteps. Slow, calm, deliberate. A tall figure emerged from the shadows. He wore a long black cloak, untouched by dust. His pale face looked impossibly young, yet his silver hair flowed to his waist. His eyes burned like fresh blood beneath the moonlight. He wasn't smiling. He didn't need to. His presence alone made the mountain feel smaller. Jonathan forced himself to speak. "Who are you?" The stranger looked toward the night sky before answering. "I have had many names. Kings feared one, empires feared another. But the first has been forgotten." He took another step. "My name was Cain." The mountain fell silent. Even the wind disappeared. One frightened guard raised his rifle. "Stay back." The pale man slowly turned his head. "You brought iron. Against something older than fire." The guard fired. The gunshot echoed across the valley. The bullet struck the stranger's chest. It stopped, floating, without touching him. Jonathan stared in disbelief. The bullet slowly melted until nothing remained. The vampire looked almost disappointed. So little has changed. Then he vanished. One heartbeat. He stood 20 feet away. The next, he stood behind the guard. No one saw him move. The terrified soldier dropped his rifle. I... The vampire gently placed one hand on the man's shoulder. "I remember when humans still hunted with stone." The guard suddenly became still. His skin turned pale. His hair whitened. His body crumbled into gray dust. The night wind carried him away. Nothing remained. Jonathan stepped backward. "What are you?" The stranger looked at him with quiet curiosity. "You already know." "No. You simply stopped believing." Lightning flashed across the sky. For one brief moment, Jonathan saw the chamber beyond the gate. His heart nearly stopped. It wasn't a tomb. It was a throne room. Thousands of black stone pillars stretched into darkness. Ancient banners still hung from the ceiling. Broken crowns covered the floor. Not one. Hundreds. Each belonged to a different kingdom. At the center stood a throne carved from black crystal. Behind it, a wall covered with names. Thousands upon thousands of names. Everyone scratched into stone. Jonathan stepped closer. "What are they?" The vampire answered softly. "My meals." The historian looked again. They weren't names, they were kingdoms. Entire civilizations. Some he recognized. Many had disappeared from history. The vampire calmly walked toward the throne. When a kingdom forgets the night remembers them. Jonathan's hands trembled. "So every lost empire." The vampire nodded. "They blamed wars. They blamed famine. They blamed plague." He slowly sat upon the crystal throne. "They never blamed us." The mountain suddenly shook. A third guard screamed. Everyone turned. The cave entrance had vanished. Solid stone sealed the opening. They were trapped. One guard whispered, "We're dead." The vampire quietly answered, "No. Dead comes much later." Jonathan gathered his courage. If vampires ruled the world, why did you disappear? For the first time, the vampire's expression changed. Sadness, real sadness. He looked toward the broken crowns scattered across the floor. "Because we became arrogant. We stopped hunting shadows. We hunted kingdoms. And when monsters become kings, They create heroes. Jonathan frowned. Heroes? The vampire nodded. The first hunters. Before Jonathan could ask another question, a deafening horn echoed through the mountain, not from outside, from deep beneath the throne. The vampire stood instantly. His calm expression vanished. Impossible. Another horn sounded, then another. 3 blasts. The ancient king slowly whispered, "They found us." Jonathan looked confused. Who? The vampire turned toward the darkness beyond the throne. For the first time, fear filled his crimson eyes. The Order. Suddenly, every torch inside the throne room burst into brilliant white flames. The stone walls began glowing with strange golden symbols. The vampire stepped backward. No, they still exist. A massive crack split the throne room floor. Blinding light erupted from below. Out of the glowing chasm, a giant silver cross slowly rose into the air. Not carried by men. It floated by itself. Ancient, scarred, covered with thousands of battle marks. The vampire king lowered his head. The weapon that ended our empire. Then, a deep voice echoed through the chamber. Old, powerful, unshaken. Children of the night, your judgment has finally come. The silver cross blazed brighter than the sun, and from the light, a line of armored hunters slowly emerged. Their leader carried a sword that glowed like dawn itself. The oldest war in human history had begun again. The silver cross floated above the throne room. Its light burned through the darkness like the rising sun. Every vampire inside the ancient hall stepped backward. Not from fear, from memory. The vampire king stared at the glowing weapon. His voice became almost a whisper. They never destroyed it. They only hid it. Jonathan Ashcroft looked toward the armored warriors emerging from the light. There were only 12. Just 12. Yet each one walked without hesitation into a hall filled with creatures that had ruled the night for thousands of years. The leader wore silver armor engraved with strange symbols. Across his back rested a sword that shined brighter than fire. His face was hidden beneath a steel helmet. Only his piercing blue eyes could be seen. He planted the glowing sword into the stone floor. The entire mountain trembled. "I am Commander Lucian, last keeper of the dawn. The Order has returned." The vampire king slowly smiled. "So, one hunter still lives." Lucian shook his head. "No. I am merely the last." The vampire king laughed. The sound echoed through every chamber beneath the mountain. "You still think 12 hunters can stop an empire?" Lucian looked around the throne room. The broken crowns, the ancient banners, the endless darkness. Then he calmly answered, "We did once." Silence. Jonathan stared at both men. "You've fought before?" The vampire king looked toward the ancient throne. "For centuries. We ruled the night. They protected the dawn." Lucian slowly removed his helmet. His face carried dozens of scars. Each one looked centuries old. Jonathan frowned. "You're human," Lucian nodded. "Mostly." The historian looked confused. "What does that mean?" Instead of answering, Lucian reached into his cloak. He removed an ancient book wrapped in iron chains. The vampire king's smile vanished. "No. You still have it." Lucian placed the book upon the floor. The chains unlocked by themselves. The pages slowly opened. None contained words, only portraits, hundreds of them. Kings, queens, generals, popes, explorers, every famous ruler from forgotten history. Jonathan leaned closer. "What is this?" Lucian answered quietly. "The Book of Shadows. It records every ruler who secretly became a vampire." Jonathan's heart pounded. He flipped another page. Alexander, Charlemagne, unnamed emperors, lost queens, entire bloodlines. History wasn't missing. It had been rewritten. The Vampire King calmly walked toward the book. Close it. Lucian didn't move. Jonathan continued turning pages. Then he stopped. One portrait looked unfinished. No face, only a blank silhouette. Beneath it, one name had already been written. Jonathan Ashcroft. Jonathan's blood ran cold. "What is this?" Lucian looked directly at him. "Your future." Jonathan stepped backward. "No, I just arrived. You were chosen long before tonight." The Vampire King slowly nodded. "He speaks the truth." Jonathan looked between them. "What are you talking about?" The ancient king raised one pale hand. The air around Jonathan shimmered. A strange symbol slowly appeared on the back of his hand. A black crescent moon. It hadn't been there before. Jonathan tried rubbing it away. It only grew darker. Lucian closed his eyes. "It has begun." The Vampire King smiled. "The first hunger has found its heir." Jonathan shouted, "I don't understand." The ancient king looked almost sympathetic. "No one chooses the first hunger. It chooses them." Suddenly, the mountain shook violently. A loud crack echoed above. The ceiling split open. Moonlight poured into the throne room. The moment the silver light touched the Vampire King, his body transformed. His eyes became brighter than crimson. Massive black wings burst from his back. Long claws emerged from his hands. His shadow spread across the walls until it covered the entire chamber. Jonathan realized something horrifying. Everything he had seen before had only been human disguise. This was the true king of vampires. The hunters immediately formed a circle. Lucian raised his glowing sword. The Vampire King spread his wings. "I warned you." The world was not ready to remember us. The mountain exploded. Stone pillars collapsed. The ancient throne shattered into pieces. Far beneath the ruins, something gigantic opened its eyes. Not another vampire. Not another hunter. Something both sides feared. The Vampire King slowly turned toward the darkness below. For the first time in thousands of years, his voice trembled. It woke. Lucian's face turned pale. "Impossible," Jonathan whispered. "What woke?" Before either man answered, an enormous hand made entirely of black smoke emerged from beneath the mountain. Its claws wrapped around the broken throne. Then, a second pair of crimson eyes opened in the darkness, much larger, much older than the Vampire King himself. A voice echoed through the collapsing mountain. "My children, why have you awakened your creator?" Every vampire immediately fell to their knees. Even the Vampire King bowed his head. The first creature, the one every vampire feared, had returned. The mountain stopped shaking, not because the danger had passed, because something far worse had awakened. The giant hand of black smoke rested upon the shattered throne. Its claws were longer than ships. Its shadow swallowed the entire throne room. Then, the darkness itself began taking shape. A towering figure slowly emerged from beneath the mountain. No wings, no fangs, no monstrous face. He looked perfectly human, tall, pale, dressed in robes darker than midnight. His silver eyes held no anger, only endless age. The Vampire King immediately fell to one knee. Every vampire followed. Not one dared look into his eyes. Jonathan Ashcroft whispered, "Who is he?" Commander Lucian answered with a trembling voice. "We don't know. We never learned his real name. The Order only called him the first one." The ancient figure slowly looked around the ruined throne room. His gaze rested on every vampire, then every hunter. Finally, Jonathan. So many centuries. And you still fight over my mistake." His voice was calm, almost gentle. Jonathan couldn't believe it. "Mistake?" The first one slowly nodded. "I never created vampires. I tried to cure death." Silence. Every hunter looked stunned. Even the vampire king lowered his head in shame. Thousands of years earlier, before kingdoms, before empires, before history itself, there had been a great plague. Entire tribes disappeared. Children died. Parents buried families every sunrise. The first one had refused to accept it. I searched every mountain, every forest, every hidden cave, looking for life that could never end. Finally, he found it. Deep beneath the earth, a river unlike any other. Its water glowed black beneath the stone. The first one looked toward Jonathan. It wasn't water. It was living darkness. Jonathan frowned. Living darkness? It promised eternal life. It never mentioned the price. The chamber grew colder. The first one slowly raised one hand. Black liquid appeared above his palm. It moved like blood, yet no drop ever fell. I drank. For one beautiful moment, I believed I had defeated death. His expression became sorrowful. Then, death became part of me. The black liquid suddenly spread across the floor. Every torch went out. The temperature dropped so quickly that frost covered the stone walls. Jonathan could see his own breath. The first one whispered, "I no longer needed food. I no longer needed sleep. I no longer grew old." The vampire king quietly finished the sentence. "You only needed blood." The first one closed his eyes. I hungered for life itself. Jonathan slowly stepped backward. "So every vampire came from you?" "No." The ancient figure looked toward the vampire king. "They came from those who chose immortality." The vampire king lowered his head. "We begged him. We watched him survive. We feared death. So we asked for the same gift." The first one's voice became heavy. "I warned them. They called it a blessing. I called it a prison." Suddenly, the walls around the throne room began glowing. Ancient murals appeared where solid stone had been. Jonathan stared. The paintings showed the first vampires, not attacking villages, not hunting humans. They were protecting them, guarding cities, fighting monsters. "What happened?" Lucian slowly answered. "They were heroes." Jonathan looked confused. "Heroes? For a time." The first one nodded. "Immortality changes people. The centuries steal compassion. Eventually, everyone becomes hungry." The murals changed. The first vampires became kings, then conquerors, then tyrants, finally, monsters. Jonathan realized something terrifying. No one had cursed them. Time had. The first one slowly turned toward the vampire king. "You were supposed to end our bloodline." The ancient king looked away. "I couldn't. You became afraid. I became lonely." Silence filled the chamber. Then, a loud crack echoed beneath the mountain. The black river, shown in the murals, was rising. Dark liquid burst through the broken floor. It spread across the throne room like living shadows. Wherever it touched stone, new vampire symbols appeared. The first one's calm expression disappeared. "No, it has awakened." Jonathan looked toward the rising darkness. "What is it?" The first one whispered. "The river." Lucian tightened his grip on the glowing sword. "The source." The vampire king slowly stood. His crimson eyes widened with horror. "We sealed it beneath the mountain." The black river continued rising. Faces appeared within its surface, thousands of them. Some cried, some screamed, Some laughed. None were alive. The first one stared into the darkness. I thought I buried it forever. The river suddenly spoke, not with one voice, with millions. You buried nothing. You only buried us. The black liquid erupted toward the ceiling. The mountain split open. Across the world, every vampire simultaneously looked toward the night sky. They all felt the same thing. The source of their immortality was calling them home. Then, the river formed a gigantic crown made entirely of living darkness. It slowly floated toward Jonathan. The first one shouted for the first time. "Don't let it choose him!" Jonathan looked up as the crown of blood stopped inches above his head, and every vampire in the throne room bowed to their next king. The crown of blood hovered above Jonathan Ashcroft. It wasn't forged from gold. It wasn't carved from stone. It flowed, alive. Dark crimson liquid twisted through the air, forming a crown that constantly changed shape. Every vampire inside the throne room immediately bowed. Even the vampire king lowered his head. Only Commander Lucian remained standing. He raised the sword of dawn. "No, the crown has chosen the wrong soul." The first one stepped forward. His silver eyes never left Jonathan. "It doesn't choose the strongest. It chooses the emptiest." Jonathan looked confused. "What does that mean?" The first one answered quietly. "It searches for a heart, still deciding what it wants to become." The living crown slowly descended. Jonathan instinctively stepped backward, but the darkness followed him. Closer, slower, patient, as if it already knew. He couldn't escape forever. The vampire king finally spoke. "It has waited thousands of years. For someone exactly like you." Jonathan shook his head. "I'm not a king." The vampire king smiled sadly. "Neither was I." Suddenly, the black river exploded upward. A massive wave crashed through the throne room. But it wasn't water. It was living memory. Jonathan found himself standing somewhere else. A city, ancient beyond imagination. Towering white buildings reached toward the sky. Golden temples reflected the morning sun. Children laughed in crowded streets. Thousands of people celebrated. No fear, no monsters, no vampires. The first one appeared beside him. This was the First Kingdom. Jonathan looked around in amazement. It was beautiful. The ancient man nodded. For one day, the sky suddenly darkened. Not with clouds, with wings. Millions of black creatures descended from above. They weren't vampires. They were shadows. Living darkness poured into the city. People screamed. Buildings collapsed. The first one ran through the streets, trying to save everyone. He reached the glowing black river beneath the city, the same river now flooding the throne room. "I believed it could save them," Jonathan whispered. It lied. The first one closed his eyes. "It always tells the truth. It simply never tells the whole truth." The vision changed. The dying people drank from the river. Their wounds vanished. Their hearts began beating again. Then, their eyes turned crimson. One after another, they attacked the living. Families, friends, children. Within a single night, the greatest kingdom in history destroyed itself. Jonathan slowly realized the horror. The first vampires weren't monsters. They were victims. The first one nodded. They became monsters later. The vision shattered. Jonathan returned to the throne room. The crown of blood floated only inches away. Commander Lucien rushed forward. He swung the sword of dawn. The glowing blade struck the crown. Nothing happened. Instead, the sword cracked. A thin black line spread across its silver edge. Lucian froze. No. The Dawn Blade. The first one looked devastated. It feeds on hope. The brighter the light, the stronger the darkness becomes. The crown suddenly split into thousands of crimson droplets. Each floated around Jonathan. None touched him. They simply circled him, waiting, watching. Then, every vampire in the chamber gasped. The droplets stopped moving. They formed words in the air. He is not the last king. Silence. The vampire king slowly looked toward the first one. You knew. The ancient creator lowered his head. I feared it. Jonathan frowned. What does it mean? The river answered. Its voice echoed from every wall. The last king has already been born. The mountain trembled violently. Far outside, thousands of vampires began arriving. Ancient lords, forgotten queens, warriors who had slept beneath castles for centuries. Every road leading to the mountain filled with pale figures. They weren't coming to fight. They were coming to witness. Commander Lucian looked toward the entrance. His face lost all color. There are millions, the vampire king whispered. They've heard the call. Jonathan asked, whose call? The black river rose into a giant spiral. Within its surface, a face slowly appeared. Not the first one. Not the vampire king. Someone else. Younger. Smiling. His crimson eyes glowed brighter than the moon. The first one staggered backward. For the first time, the immortal creator looked afraid. No! I destroyed you. The smiling stranger laughed. You destroyed my body. But you forgot. Darkness doesn't die. The mountain exploded. A pillar of black light shot into the heavens. Across the entire world, every vampire fell to one knee. Not for the crown, not for the first one, for the man rising from the river. He slowly opened his arms, and the ancient vampires whispered the name that history had erased from every language. The Prince of Blood has returned. The pillar of black light pierced the heavens. Every vampire across the world, from frozen mountains to forgotten castles, to cities hidden beneath the earth, fell to one knee. No command had been given. No words had been spoken. They simply knew. The Prince of Blood had returned. Jonathan Ashcroft stared at the smiling figure rising from the living river. He looked no older than 30. His pale face carried no scars. His crimson eyes glowed like twin eclipses. Unlike the vampire king, he wore no crown. Unlike the first one, he carried no sadness, only confidence, as though history had always belonged to him. The first one slowly stepped forward. I ended you. The prince smiled. You ended a body. You cannot kill an idea. The black river circled around him like a living serpent. Commander Lucian raised the cracked sword of dawn. Stand back! The prince looked toward the legendary blade. He almost laughed. That sword once frightened kings. Now, it can barely frighten itself. Lucian charged. The glowing sword sliced toward the prince's neck. At the last instant, the prince simply raised one finger. The blade stopped, perfectly still. Not because he caught it, because time around the sword had stopped. The glow faded. Silver rust spread across the ancient weapon. Crack, crack, crack. The sword of dawn shattered into thousands of glittering fragments. Silence filled the throne room. The hunters looked in disbelief. For 3,000 years, the sword had never been broken. The prince gently brushed silver dust from his shoulder. So this is humanity's last hope? The first one closed his eyes. No, it was. The prince slowly walked across the chamber. Every step caused ancient vampire symbols to appear beneath his feet. The broken crowns scattered across the floor floated into the air. Hundreds of forgotten crowns. Kings, queens, emperors. Each one circled him, before turning into black ash. I have no need for crowns. I created kings. Jonathan frowned. You created them? The prince nodded. The first one gave them immortality. I gave them ambition. The throne room became silent. Jonathan slowly turned toward the first one. You never told us there were two of you. The ancient creator lowered his head. There weren't. The prince smiled. There still aren't. Jonathan's heart skipped. What? The first one looked directly into Jonathan's eyes. He isn't my brother. He isn't another vampire. The prince finished the sentence. I am everything. He removed from himself. The living river rippled violently. Thousands of memories flashed across its surface. Jonathan saw the truth. Long before the first one drank from the river, he had feared what immortality would do to him. His anger, his pride, his greed, his hunger. He had tried to separate them from his soul. The river accepted the sacrifice, but it never destroyed those emotions. It gave them life. The first one whispered, I buried my darkness. And it became him. The prince bowed theatrically. I am every selfish thought, every cruel decision, every temptation, and every king who ever chose power over mercy. Jonathan stepped backward. So you've existed since the beginning? The prince smiled. I've been whispering into human hearts for thousands of years. Lightning exploded above the mountain. The ancient murals on the walls began changing. Jonathan watched kingdoms rise, only to fall into war. Brother against brother, friend against friend. Every great empire eventually collapsed. And in every mural, a smiling stranger stood quietly in the background, watching, waiting, never ruling, only influencing. The prince looked almost amused. Humans blame vampires. They should blame themselves. The first one clenched his fists. You corrupted my children. No. The prince shook his head. I simply asked them what they wanted most. The black river surged higher. Millions of vampire voices echoed together. Hunger! 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 The prince raised both hands. Instantly, every vampire in the chamber transformed. Their eyes burned brighter. Their claws grew longer. Even the ancient vampire king struggled to control himself. Jonathan realized something horrifying. The prince wasn't commanding them. He was removing the last piece of humanity they had left. The vampire king fell to one knee. No. I won't become that again. The prince looked disappointed. You always were my favorite. Suddenly, the black crescent mark on Jonathan's hand began glowing. Pain shot through his arm. The mark spread toward his heart. The prince smiled wider. There you are. Jonathan collapsed. His heartbeat grew louder. Boom! 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 With every beat, the living river answered. The first one rushed toward him. It's choosing! Commander Lucian shouted. Choosing what? The ancient creator's face turned pale. The next vessel. Jonathan looked at the spreading black mark. What vessel? The prince slowly knelt beside him. His voice became almost gentle. I don't want your blood. I don't want your soul. He placed one finger against Jonathan's forehead. I want your future. The mark suddenly stopped spreading. Then, it formed a strange symbol. Not a crown, not a crescent. An ancient door. The first one stared at it in horror. It cannot be. Jonathan struggled to breathe. What is it? The first one whispered. The seal. The prison. That has never been opened. The prince slowly stood and looked toward the night sky. For the first time, his smile disappeared. It has finally found its key. Deep beneath the mountain, far below the Black River, an enormous stone gate groaned open. Not the gate Jonathan had entered, a far older one, a gate that had remained sealed since before the first vampire, before the first kingdom, before the first human memory. From beyond it, something exhaled. The breath alone extinguished every torch in the mountain. Then, two colossal golden eyes opened in the darkness. The golden eyes opened. Every sound vanished. The living river froze. Even the Prince of Blood stopped smiling. For the first time, fear crossed his face. Deep beneath the mountain, the ancient gate continued opening. Not quickly, slowly, as though whatever lay behind it had all the time in existence. Jonathan Ashcroft struggled to stand. The strange mark on his chest still burned. The symbol of the ancient door pulsed with every heartbeat. The first one looked at him in horror. "It chose you." Jonathan looked toward the opening below. "What is behind that gate?" The first one answered with a voice barely above a whisper. "The truth." Commander Lucian stepped beside him. "No. The end." The Prince of Blood slowly walked toward the enormous doorway. His confidence had vanished. He stopped several steps away. He would go no closer. Jonathan noticed. "You fear it." The prince laughed softly. "I fear nothing." The first one looked directly at him. "You fear your father." Silence. Every vampire stared at the ancient creator. Jonathan frowned. "Father." The prince closed his crimson eyes. "You should have kept that secret." The living river exploded upward. Dark waves crashed against the ceiling. The mountain shook so violently that entire stone pillars collapsed. The first one raised both hands. Silver light spread through the chamber. For a brief moment, the river retreated. Jonathan looked between them. "You aren't the first vampire?" The first one slowly shook his head. "No. I was only the first human." The entire throne room became silent. Jonathan couldn't believe what he had heard. "If you were the first human, then what existed before?" The ancient gate answered. A deep voice echoed from beyond it. Older than the mountains, older than the stars. Hunger. The single word rolled through the earth like thunder. Every vampire immediately fell flat against the stone, not kneeling, prostrating themselves. Even the prince lowered his head. Jonathan remained standing, not because he was brave, because the strange mark on his chest refused to let him move. The golden eyes focused on him. The voice returned. "The key has finally arrived." The mark on Jonathan's chest blazed with golden light. The enormous gate opened wider. Inside, there was no fire, no darkness, no prison. Only an endless hallway stretching farther than the eye could see. Its walls were lined with millions of stone statues. Every statue looked human. Everyone carried the same expression. Fear. The first one slowly approached the entrance. "I remember this place." Jonathan looked at him. "You've been here?" "Once. A lifetime before history." Commander Lucien frowned. "What are those statues?" The first one answered quietly. "They're not statues." Jonathan's heart raced. "What are they?" The ancient creator lowered his head. "They're everyone who opened the gate before us." A cold wind flowed from the endless corridor. As it passed each stone figure, their faces seemed almost alive, as though they were still trying to scream. The Prince of Blood suddenly laughed. "You finally understand." Jonathan turned toward him. "Understand what?" The prince spread his arms. Vampires were never the greatest villains. We were only the first prisoners. Lightning exploded outside the mountain. The living river began draining, not into the earth, into the open gate. As the river disappeared, its true bottom became visible. Jonathan stared in disbelief. The Black River had never been a river. It was a gigantic chain, a chain made from living darkness. For thousands of years, it had wrapped around something hidden beneath the mountain. The last link snapped. The sound echoed across the entire world. Every vampire screamed at once, across every continent. Ancient castles trembled. Hidden tombs burst open. Creatures older than kingdoms awoke from forgotten sleep. The prince slowly stepped backward. "It is free," the first one whispered. "No, we released it." The golden eyes blinked once. Then, the enormous figure behind the gate finally moved. A colossal shadow stepped forward. It wasn't a vampire, it wasn't human. Its body seemed woven from darkness and starlight. Its face constantly changed. Young, old, man, woman, child, king, beggar. Every face humanity had ever worn appeared for a heartbeat before changing again. Jonathan instinctively asked, "What are you?" The being smiled. Its voice sounded like millions speaking together. "I am the first fear that ever entered the human heart." The Prince of Blood closed his eyes. The first one lowered his head. Commander Lucian dropped his shattered sword. The being took one more step. The mountain split in half. Then it looked directly at Jonathan and spoke the words that would change everything. "You came here believing vampires created evil. But evil created vampires." No one moved. No one breathed. The ancient being stood before the broken gate. Its body shifted constantly. Every face ever known appeared for a heartbeat before becoming another. It looked at Jonathan Ashcroft, then at the first one, then at the Prince of Blood. Finally, it smiled. "I have watched your world, for longer than your world has existed." The first one slowly stepped forward. "You were never supposed to escape." The being tilted its head. "I never escaped. You invited me." Silence. Jonathan looked toward the glowing mark on his chest. "The seal." "I opened it." The being nodded. "Not by choice. By design." Commander Lucian clenched his fists. "Whose design?" The answer came immediately. "Yours." The hunters stared in confusion. The being laughed. "You build kingdoms. You create wars. You chase power. You betray those you love. You always open the door yourselves." The words echoed through the mountain. Jonathan remembered every mural, every fallen empire, every vampire king, every ruined civilization. None had been forced. They had chosen. The first one closed his eyes. "I blamed the river." The being smiled. "The river never created monsters. It only revealed them." The Prince of Blood slowly laughed. "I told you. I only whispered. They made the decisions." The mountain trembled again. The being raised one hand. Suddenly, the air filled with glowing windows. Hundreds, thousands. Each window showed a different moment in history. Jonathan saw ancient empires collapsing. He saw brothers murdering brothers, kings poisoning their families, friends betraying friends, cities burning, crowds cheering executions. Every age, every nation, every civilization. The being quietly asked, "What do they all have in common?" Jonathan looked carefully. There wasn't a single vampire, not one, only humans. The first one lowered his head. "So the greatest darkness was always inside us." The being nodded. "I merely gave it a voice." Suddenly, one glowing window stopped. Jonathan walked closer. It showed a familiar scene. October 31st, 1492, the very night he had entered the mountain. He watched himself opening the ancient gate. But something was wrong. He wasn't alone. Standing behind him, almost invisible in the shadows, was the Prince of Blood. Jonathan stepped backward. "You were there." The prince smiled. "I've always been there." The next window appeared. Jonathan as a child, reading old history books. The prince stood in the corner, watching. Another window. Jonathan graduating from university. Again. The prince was there, always hidden, always smiling. Another. Jonathan discovering the forgotten map. The prince's reflection appeared inside the ink. Jonathan's voice shook. "You've followed me. My entire life." The prince nodded. "I wasn't following you. I was waiting." The first one looked horrified. "No, you planned this from the beginning." The prince answered calmly, "Long before the beginning." The being suddenly looked toward the first one. "You still haven't told them." The ancient creator became silent. Jonathan frowned. "Told us what?" The first one hesitated. For thousands of years, he had carried the secret alone. Finally, he spoke. "The prince was never trapped in the river." Jonathan stared. "What?" "I trapped myself." The prince slowly applauded. "At last." The first one continued. "I realized I could never destroy him. So I imprisoned both of us. The river wasn't his prison. It was ours." Jonathan couldn't understand. "Then why are you free?" The being answered. "Because humans forgot. The prison was never made of stone. It was made of memory." Commander Lucian slowly whispered, "The erased history." The being smiled. "Exactly. As long as humanity remembered what happened, the prison remained sealed." The first one looked devastated. "But the world forgot." The being nodded. "You erased every record. You buried every kingdom. You destroyed every warning. You called us myths. And in doing so, you unlocked the prison." Jonathan suddenly realized the terrible irony. History hadn't been erased to hide vampires. It had been erased to keep them imprisoned. The first one looked directly at Jonathan. "I spent thousands of years protecting humanity. But humanity destroyed its own protection. Outside, the earth shook violently. Volcanoes erupted. The oceans churned. Across every continent, the night sky slowly turned crimson. The moon began changing. Its silver light darkened until it became the color of fresh blood. Every vampire looked upward. Some cried, some laughed, some screamed. The being calmly watched the crimson moon rise. "It has begun," Jonathan whispered. "What has?" The being answered with one sentence. "The long night." At that exact moment, every shadow on Earth began moving, even without anyone standing nearby, and millions of people, all across the world, started seeing the same impossible figure, standing just behind them, smiling, watching, waiting. The crimson moon hung above the world. Its blood-red light reached every ocean, every mountain, every forgotten grave. Across the planet, shadows no longer obeyed the people who cast them. They moved alone. They watched, they whispered. Entire cities lost power. Animals fled into forests. Birds disappeared from the skies. The long night had begun. Jonathan Ashcroft stood at the entrance of the ancient gate. Behind him, the hunters prepared for a battle they knew they could never win. Before him stood the being called the First Fear. Beside it, the Prince of Blood smiled like a man who had waited forever. The first one slowly walked toward Jonathan. "There is still one chance." Jonathan looked at him. "Tell me." The ancient creator held out his hand. In his palm rested a tiny crystal. It glowed with soft golden light. Unlike the river, its light felt warm. alive. "What is it?" The first one smiled sadly. "My mortality." Jonathan frowned. "You still have it?" "I hid it before I drank from the river. For thousands of years, I carried the part of me that could still die." Jonathan stared at the tiny crystal. "If you become mortal, you'll die." The first one nodded. "I should have died long ago." The Prince of Blood laughed. "You still believe sacrifice changes destiny?" The first one ignored him. He placed the crystal into Jonathan's hand. "If the river gave immortality, this can take it away." Commander Lucian stepped closer. "Then destroy the river." The first one slowly shook his head. "The river cannot be destroyed. It remembers every soul it has touched." Jonathan asked. "Then how do we stop it?" The ancient creator looked toward the endless black current. "You don't destroy the source. You seal it." The first fear smiled. "And who will become the lock?" Silence. The answer slowly became clear. Jonathan looked at the glowing mark on his chest. "The key." The first one nodded. "You were never chosen to become a king. You were chosen to become the seal." Jonathan's heart sank. "If I seal it, I'll be trapped. For as long as humanity exists." The first one couldn't answer. He simply lowered his head. Outside, the crimson moon climbed higher. The crimson moon climbed higher. Entire coastlines disappeared beneath unnatural tides. Ancient vampire armies emerged from hidden catacombs. Millions marched toward the mountain, not to conquer, to witness the end of history. The Prince of Blood looked toward the approaching armies. "They've come home." The first fear spread its enormous arms. The night sky cracked open. Darkness poured across the stars. One by one, the constellations vanished. Commander Lucien whispered, "There won't be another sunrise." The first fear answered, "There doesn't need to be. The night remembers better." Jonathan closed his eyes. His entire life suddenly made sense. The forgotten map, the mysterious symbol, the ancient gate. None of it had been chance. He had been walking toward this mountain since the day he was born. The Prince of Blood stepped closer. "You have another choice." Jonathan opened his eyes. "What choice?" "Wear the crown. Rule beside me. No more death. No more fear. No more weakness." The crown of blood appeared again, floating, patient, waiting. The first one looked directly at Jonathan. "Listen carefully. The crown offers peace without freedom. The seal offers freedom without peace." Jonathan looked between them. One promised eternal power. The other, eternal sacrifice. The mountain shook violently. The first fear slowly walked toward the open world. Every step caused forests beyond the mountain to wither into black ash. Rivers stopped flowing. The wind itself seemed to die. Commander Lucian drew a silver dagger, the last weapon the Order possessed. He handed it to Jonathan. "This blade cannot kill monsters." Jonathan looked confused. "What does it kill?" Lucian answered, "Choices." Jonathan gripped the dagger, the glowing crystal, the silver blade, the burning mark. Everything had led here. The Prince of Blood stretched out his hand. The first one stepped beside Jonathan. Neither spoke again. They already knew. Jonathan slowly walked toward the living river. The black water rose to meet him. It no longer looked evil. It looked hungry. The mark on his chest blazed brighter than the crimson moon. The ancient gate began closing by itself. The first fear stopped walking. For the first time, it looked uncertain. Jonathan raised the crystal above the river. The first one whispered, "Whatever happens, don't look back." Jonathan nodded. Then, he stepped into the living darkness. The river exploded into a column of black and golden light. The entire world shook. Every vampire screamed. Every shadow froze. Every star disappeared. And then, from inside the river, came Jonathan's final words. "Close the gate." The mountain erupted in blinding light. No one could see whether Jonathan had become mankind's greatest hero or its final king. The mountain disappeared, not beneath fire, not beneath an earthquake. It simply ceased to exist. A sphere of black and golden light expanded across the valley. Every vampire screamed. Every hunter fell to their knees. The first fear stood motionless. For the first time since before human history, it looked uncertain. Then, the light collapsed inward. Silence. The living river was gone. The ancient gate was gone. The throne room was gone. Only an empty valley remained beneath the crimson moon. Commander Lucien slowly stood. "Jonathan." There was no answer. The first one closed his eyes. "He did it." The Prince of Blood looked around in disbelief. "No, that's impossible." The crown of blood suddenly cracked. Thin fractures spread across its surface. One by one, the ancient vampires looked at their hands. Their crimson eyes slowly faded. Their claws disappeared. Their fangs crumbled into dust. Thousands of immortals collapsed to the ground. For the first time in centuries, their hearts began beating again. Some laughed. Some cried. Many simply stared at the sunrise beginning to appear beyond the horizon. The long night was ending. The first fear looked upward. The crimson moon slowly turned silver once again. It spoke quietly. "So, this is how hope survives." Its enormous body began breaking apart. Not into ash, into shadows. Millions of tiny fragments drifted into the wind. The first one watched silently. "You cannot destroy fear." The ancient being nodded. "No. You only choose not to obey it." With those final words, the first fear vanished. Forever. The Prince of Blood stumbled backward. His body began fading. "No. You need me. You always choose power. You always choose greed." The first one looked at him sadly. "They still will. But now, they'll also have a choice." The prince smiled one last time. "A choice is enough." Then he dissolved into black mist. Gone. Commander Lucien looked around the empty valley. "What happened to Jonathan?" The first one slowly pointed toward the center of the valley. There stood a single stone door. No walls, no mountain, only a weathered doorway standing alone beneath the morning sky. Upon it, new words slowly appeared. "The gate shall remain closed until humanity forgets again." Lucien whispered, "He's inside." The first one nodded. He became the seal. He will guard the gate until the end of time. The hunters removed their helmets. Every vampire who had regained mortality bowed toward the lonely stone door, not to a king, not to a conqueror, to a man who chose everyone else's future instead of his own. Years passed, then decades, then centuries. The story slowly became legend. The hunters rebuilt the world. The remaining vampires disappeared into ordinary human lives, without immortality. They grew old. They loved. They raised families. They died, exactly as they once feared. History books recorded none of it. The mountain was never mentioned. The river never existed. The first fear became a fairy tale. The Vampire King became a myth. Jonathan Ashcroft's name vanished from every record. Only one person remained. The first one, now finally mortal. He wandered the world as an old traveler. Every generation, he searched libraries, museums, forgotten ruins. Whenever someone came too close to discovering the truth, he quietly left behind one warning. A single sentence, hidden in forgotten manuscripts, carved beneath abandoned temples, written inside books no one believed. Some doors are locked because they love humanity. One autumn evening, thousands of years later, an ordinary little girl wandered into an ancient museum. She noticed an old stone fragment displayed in a dusty corner. Nobody else looked at it. The words carved into the stone had nearly disappeared. She read them aloud. "The gate shall remain closed." Suddenly, a tiny crack appeared across the stone, so small that no one else noticed. Far beyond the stars, beyond memory, beyond every forgotten legend, a single heartbeat echoed. Boom! Then silence. The old traveler stopped walking. He looked towards the sky. A faint smile crossed his face. They're beginning to forget. He closed his eyes. "Jonathan, I hope you're still holding the door. Because history has a terrible habit of repeating itself. And perhaps the greatest secret humanity ever buried was never that vampires existed. It was that someone was still standing between them and us.